All right, welcome to Unusual Profits. We're back for another week. This is an idea episode. So basically the format is me, Michael Gridley, Hayden Cohen, who works with me and is in Argentina today, and Shingi, who is in the Argentina of North America, Seattle, pitch each other business ideas and schemes that we heard the past week. Intention is to create some content that's pretty good, but also help get everyone's juices flowing around business opportunities and money-making opportunities. So we have a good list today. We worked on it in the pre-show, and excited for Shingi to give us the first pitch. So tell us how to make some money, Shingi.
All right, gentlemen. So today, I was just looking through Paul Graham's tweets, and I was like, "Wow, Y Combinator has a pretty impressive record." And I've dabbled in I have an e-commerce business. Kind of these partnerships with the aggregators that they're starting to do now. But most of them, they take full ownership, so they take 51% of your company. So you're really giving away almost everything in terms of decisions, right? But I was wondering, is there a way where Y Combinator takes 7, where you can give away a smaller amount and then tap into, significant resources like what Y Combinator has? Because honestly, e-commerce or retail is not that difficult. You don't need the technical talent like you do for a startup or anything like that. But what you need is you need resources. You need intros into retail outlets. You need intros to manufacturers. You need someone to help with product development, depending what space you're on. But it's a lot simpler. So you could really have a small core team that could help a lot of businesses. And I think that 7% or a fee like that would be worthwhile for someone like me. And you're not giving up full control. Again, you're not going to be making billions of dollars like you would with Y Combinator, but if your mind's a little bit smaller and happy with tens of millions or something like that, I think it could be a great incubator of kinds.
Yeah. So just so I understand, the current incubators for D2C, like e-commerce businesses, take 50% of your company. Is that what you said?
Well, it's the aggregators. This is what they're doing. So the aggregators, if you want to do a partnership model where you can still continue running it, some of them will say we'll buy 51%. So, when they have 51%, they have full control, right? They can sell you for $1 if they wanted to.
So this is if I sell to a Thrasio or one of those guys and I want to go work for them, they'll let me roll over some of my equity into the new thing. That's what you're talking about?
Well, the structure is really that you build a new LLC, you get 49% of that LLC, they get 51% of that LLC, you transfer your assets into that LLC, and you don't have equity in the big aggregator, you retain equity in your company. So you're incentivized to continue growing your company, right, for some second exit down the line. But then they have full control of your company. And you do get a small exit with the 51%, which is beneficial.
And so then the Y Combinator business model today is what? They put in how much money for how much of your company?
I think you get 7%. Or they take 7%.
I think you get 150 grand or something like that.
Wow. So they're valuing your business really low. Okay, go ahead, Hayden.
Yeah, what are the differences in resources between selling to a Thrasio versus this model in your mind, Shingi?
The resources
in terms of a capital and then shared resources.
I would say the shared resources is basically the same. You're taking, instead of an aggregator model, you're kind of spreading yourself across a bunch of up and coming D2C e-commerce brands. That would be so. In a sense, it's the same, but the aggregator is putting out, or the incubator is putting out far less money, and just taking, spreading the risk on a bunch of different businesses, hoping that the same, model that Y Combinator, one makes it, that pays for everyone else, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, part of the challenge, we talked about this on Twitter, there's this power law distribution of returns in venture, and you have to have some $1 billion plus exits in order to make these types of models really, really pay off and work super well. So that would be my question. Is there a sweet spot, a Venn diagram enough where you can own enough of the company and have enough to average out all of those outcomes, right? What is your best case outcome in one of these D2C brands? You end up as Casper or Warby Parker and you own, it's a $350 million company, or is it there's $1 billion outcomes in this kind of D2C stuff?
There's definitely $1 billion. I think Orgain just sold for $1 billion to Nestle. So there are some $1 billion outcomes. And that was by a group, I think, called Butterfly. It's a private equity group. So it's definitely possible. But there's no kind of like really simple, like, hey, join this, incubator. We'll give you support on retail. We'll give you support on product development, on kind of all that stuff, and not take your whole business from you.
Yeah. Do you think the people in the program would be willing to give up 10, 15, 20% of their business for a few $100,000 plus all those services?
I think so. Yeah. And especially if you're early and like, I mean, if you hit a niche and you have a good idea and you have great branding and someone sees that and it's like, wow, I want to support that. I think it's feasible. Again,
Would you have signed up for that before you got into e-commerce?
very possibly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially if it was like, when we were smaller, like 2 or 3 years ago, I think that would have been an easy sign up for me.
And something you alluded to is that there's a lot of repeatable processes right at the beginning of starting the e-commerce brand, and then scaling it up, is kind of similar on ad spend and kind of how to do digital marketing. So what problems do you see like this model having? Like, why isn't this being done right now? Or like I'm confused because it seems like a no-brainer idea for this to have been done several times over.
I think it's kind of being done outside of Amazon. I think like Nick Sharma, I think is his name. I think he does something similar with his brands, but nothing's really done in the Amazon space. And again, well, they have like, you get these Facebook ads for Amazon automation, right? Which are total scams. And they just kind of like get you to pay for a business and they hope that one succeeds. And then they keep like, I think 50% of the profits or something going forward. There's nothing like this at a pretty basic level that gives you solutions for Amazon PPC, gives you solutions for branding, gives you solutions for marketing and manufacturing, all the basic stuff. So you have your bases covered there and then helps you grow. You're both incentivized to help each other grow. And then retailers are a big one too, because I feel like that's heavily to do with relationships, right? You need a relationship with the retailer to get into the retailer. So if there's an established group that has those relationships, that could be really beneficial. Most Amazon brands explode when they get into retail. That's where way more growth is.
Super interesting. All right. Are you going to pursue this?
No.
Okay. Well, if somebody knows why it won't work, I think Hayden, you and I are lost as to why it won't work. But I like the idea. I'm just concerned, like, are there enough outsized outcomes to make the economic model functional? You need enough of those. And can you do it? I just don't know. But maybe somebody else has a reason why this does or doesn't work. But I like it at first glance. We need a Y Combinator for e-com. Cool. Hayden, you wanna do yours?
Cool. So I help run a platform to help folks hire Latin American talent called Near. And our customers are constantly asking us for help with their job descriptions. Chatted with friends at other companies about roles that they're hiring for, and I've heard that writing job descriptions can be a huge pain point for tons of folks. Something I've thought of that I think would be a really smart SaaS service is something that looks at job posts on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn exposes at least a range of applications that job posts are receiving, and you can also filter them down by categories to find jobs for marketing or PPC analysts or financial analysts or developers and whatnot. And you can get pretty precise results as to what job posts are doing well for which jobs. And you can run a sentiment analysis to essentially use AI to help you write job posts that are going to do well. I think this would be super smart, and I think a ton of companies would use it. Shingi, when I told him the idea before, essentially called it the copy.ai for job descriptions.
I dig it.
Same.
Oh, go ahead, Shingi.
I was gonna say, I think it's a great idea. You could almost, like, the way I would envision the UI is like, all right, I want to hire a Ruby on Rails engineer, like a senior engineer, right? So I would put that in there, and then you would auto-populate basically a bunch of check marks with these different descriptions for what you want this person to do. So the average, senior Ruby on Rails developer has all of these things in their job description. And you can go through it and review it, be like, yeah, actually, I need this guy to do that. He needs to do this. He needs to do that. He needs to do that. And then at the end of the day, you get like a really precise job description that took you a couple seconds to write, versus having to think about it so much. versus the copy AI
Yeah.
version of it, where it's completely automated and you may get some stuff in there that you don't need or you need. I don't know.
I was going to ask about market sizing and stuff like that. Like, this is a very niche kind of SaaS thing. Like, are there enough people out there that would want to pay enough to make this a viable business?
So this is something we thought about at the beginning of Near early on. Like, is this something we need to include when people post job descriptions? And we were like, oh, it's probably not necessary. Everybody wants to figure it out. I'm finding more and more that companies, large and small, startups to enterprises, are constantly looking for feedback on the job descriptions they write. And, time is money. It's expensive to get help for something that could be relatively cheap. It might get a ton of traction across various industries because it's a super flexible product and probably, relatively easy to develop. And if you thought that you could get a ton of distribution on this, you could start really improving the product based on getting feedback from people. How many, folks did you get applications from? What platforms did you post on? Which platform performed the most or performed the best? Then you kind of see similarities across the board. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of the fundamental question there.
Yeah.
To see if this could become a big business.
Well, one time I talked to a recruiter and he told me his biggest time consumption was not actually talking to clients or doing interviews. It was formatting resumes to be submitted to employers. Like, he would take the candidate resumes and spend 15 minutes formatting it in a way that the employer would actually want to look at it. So, I wonder if this is somewhat of a two-sided service, right? Or like, besides just helping you write a better job description, like interpreting resumes, like interpretive dance for resumes, would save a lot of people a lot of time. Because these recruiters, I think, are spending hours, every day just reformatting client websites before submitting them, or client resumes before submitting them.
It's definitely an adjacent product idea. And it's super difficult because depending on where people are applying from, like on LinkedIn, you have some standardized format for a resume. But yeah, how can you standardize resumes across the internet? That's actually also probably a super smart idea. Who pays for that in that case? You probably have to make the service free for job seekers. How do you monetize that?
Yeah. Or charge the recruiters, because recruiters are getting paid for placement fees and stuff like that. So
I think
super cool.
Yeah, going upstream is pretty interesting. One of the biggest things I learned as a product manager at Amazon was like standardization is required for automation. Like, you can't have one without the other, right?
Yep.
And if you're standardizing, like, going back to my vision of the UI where you have like checkboxes, right? And those are each different skills or traits that you want someone to have. Then me as a job seeker, I can see the same checkboxes and maybe rate my ability to do those things to say like, I can do that very well. I can do that good. I can't do that. Some scoring. And so when you build the job description, you are automatically matched with candidates who've already identified that specific skill set, right? So you're like joining them really quickly to find the right people, maybe much faster than this kind of loose job description world we live in today.
Yeah, which 60% of, most job descriptions are incomplete or bullshit. 60% of resumes have lies on them. So like that's the statistic. It's pretty bad. There's got to be some sort of standardization there.
This leads into another idea I have, which is on the Twitter list. But Michael, if you want to do something else,
let me do my Expedia for medical tourism, and then I definitely want to
go for it.
Do the list. So this came from a tweet that went pretty viral. It was so here's the tweet is request for startup. Expedia, but for medical tourism. So Expedia is a platform where you can go and find different hotels, travel options, book it all through there, and then they make money by taking a fee of a commission from the hotels or the travel agents or the different travel options, hotels, cars, all that kind of stuff. So Expedia, but for medical tourism, is this guy's tweet. Show me the cheapest price to get my MRI, including flights, hotel, etc. I just did the math, and it's actually cheaper to fly to Mexico City, get an MRI, stay a night, eat tacos, and fly back than it is to get an MRI in San Francisco. And this tweet actually got 4,300 likes. It's pretty impressive. And he followed on and said the MRI actually costs in pesos what it does in dollars in the States. And the peso, last I checked, is 20-1. So it's like 5% the cost if you were to fly to Mexico and get an MRI done. So this is the guy's idea, request for startup, Expedia, but for medical tourism. What do you guys think?
It's super smart. One, this is already happening with tons of folks with like tons of Mexican Americans in San Diego and places like that. They go across the border, and especially for cosmetic surgeries and LASIK type stuff, they're doing that all the time as it is. My biggest question when I saw this tweet, I guess it was last week, was the trust factor. Like, if you don't have the information, like, I would want to know a lot about doctors and see a lot of reviews from other folks who have actually done this,
right?
And have like directions, basically just like a step-by-step checklist of what to do, who to talk to, and to make sure I feel comfortable with the person performing whatever surgery on. But I think it's pretty smart. I would probably do it.
So actually this tweet went super viral. I think this is a classic idea of looking at something that at first glance should be a good business, but is actually impossible to build. And the problem is, like, if you look at what this is, you actually have three things going against you. You have a big B2C thing, right, where you're trying to sell this. Expedia, everybody travels, or a lot of people travel, so it's pretty useful. Well, how many people actually are going to qualify for medical tourism or want to do it? Very few, right? Very few are going to be interested in doing it for various reasons. One of which is, like, most of us are held captive by insurance companies. The second thing is, like, how many times are you getting an MRI a year? Like, very rarely. So you have this non-repetitive nature to it. And then on the other side, you have exactly the problem you're talking about, Hayden, which is like, how do you know which MRI provider in Mexico City to trust? And are you, the platform, going to go down there and validate that they're actually not going to murder people, like by having a faulty MRI machine that electrocutes people? Like, you just don't know. So, like, this would be one of those things that, like, if you were to, like, be in a writer's room for a TV drama, you'd be like, yeah, this definitely needs to exist. But in reality, when you look at it, like, all the deck is stacked against you being able to turn this into a real business. Like, you're just not going to be able to.
So quick counter to that, and I don't know how much of a counter this is, but you're thinking of this as like an Expedia type platform, right? Like he's saying. And
well,
so
that's what the guy called it, Expedia for medical tourism.
No. So we're looking at it as like a marketplace, right? But could it be more of like a content product, like a nerd wallet or something like that, where you just provide the information and monetize it like a content site?
Yeah.
Because where you find, XYZ place where you can get an MRI in Mexico City, and then basically have all of the different prices, and it's literally just an informational site.
Right.
There's a ton of ways to monetize that. I could see that being viable.
Yeah. Well, that comes back to the same problem. How do you, the doctor changes at a specific hospital, and it goes from the guy who is at the Harvard Medical School of Mexico, and it's like some guy from, a terrible, witch doctor school of medicine. And then how do you know? Like, that's a lot of liability to deal with, right? So that would be my pushback on that. Shingi, are you ready to invest in this one, Expedia for medical tourism?
This is good. I think you could simplify it to a travel agency. Like a luxury travel agency will pick you up at the airport in a limo. And it's still cheaper than the US. There's like another alternative here. That would be nice. But again, you still need the information, right? That's the hardest part of gathering it all.
I haven't Googled it, but I'll bet you dollars to donuts there are hundreds of medical tourism websites, people doing travel agency models for this. Like, I think my pushback is, Hayden, I don't think the pure Expedia, like this guy suggested, like, I don't think it's possible. I don't think you can build an actual business there just because of the nature of it. So anyway, happy to be wrong on that. But anyway, that's my thesis. If you want to do it, like, this sounds fun, go ahead and build it.
No, I'm probably not going to do it. Yeah.
I mean, I think this also sucks. This also sucks from a, like, like you're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem of the American healthcare system sucking, right? And really, should the world exist that, like, if you can't get a reasonable MRI, you have to fly to Mexico City to get one? Like, wouldn't you rather work on creating the world you want to live in rather than, like, stitching up like something attached together with Band-Aid, bubble gum, and baling wire. That's what this feels like.
It's definitely glamorizing like a pretty shitty truth for a lot of people.
Well, and I think it also doesn't.
Our healthcare is too expensive.
Yeah, it doesn't pass the like, would I be proud to talk about this at a cocktail party thing? Like, oh, I'm helping rich Americans fly to get cheap MRIs in Mexico City. Like, oh, okay, great. That sounds really inspiring. Your mom must be so proud. All right, moving on. Shingi, you got another one?
Yeah. All right. So this was related to Hayden's, and I had this idea the other day. It's like, I'm like I have a co-founder with like a SaaS company we're building, and he has like a Kevin Bacon challenge that he sends any developer to do, and it's it's kind of a unique like challenge to see how well a developer can implement code and write code and test code. And I was like, man, what a waste of time, right? Like a developer is going to do this task. Why not do something useful, right? And so this concept popped up. Was like, what if you could get like a bunch of people who have like these simple ideas, for instance, like some of my ideas maybe, and you can submit them to a a dev interview tool kit or whatever. I don't know what the name would be, right? So for instance, like my Shopify app idea where like I want to be able to record a customer's journey through the cart, and if there's an error, throw an error, right? Like a really simple app. And then you have if you're interviewing for people, instead of needing to come up with a challenge for them to complete, you just send them to this website and be like, hey, complete that challenge. And multiple people will complete it, right? And then so you can kind of evaluate the code of what other people have done and what this person's done, etc. And at the end of the day, like that code kicks back to me. Maybe I pay a fee to have my idea on there, and then it's completed, right? And the interviewer gets code to review. The interviewee gets to show their skills, etc. Like it's kind of a win-win-win for everyone.
Have you heard of Toggle?
I haven't.
Toggl?
No.
So Toggle offers basically small little tests for developers that and the company can kind of pick and choose. I want someone with React and Svelte JS experience, and kind of mix and match different little tests and add them up. But I think it'd be interesting to find an intersection. I mean, they do that. I don't know how great the tests are, to be honest. Like, we've never used it. It'd be interesting to mix and match something like that with something that does match the more personalized, business specific problem. But I guess that going in the exact opposite direction that you wanted to go with this one.
Right. No, I mean, that could be, that could be interesting. Like I asked, and you guys probably know this too. It's like, when you're interviewing developers, they also don't want to feel used. So if you're giving them real work, right, they don't want to feel like they're doing real work for you for free as part of their interview in some ways, right? So there need to be some balance between the two. But at least they're doing something with utility instead of like a Kevin Bacon challenge. Was my idea.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess the only worry there is like, are you going to be able to get them to allocate enough time to do anything meaningful, right? Because very few like 3-hour projects are going to be like meaningful in terms of both determining are you capable and useful in the long run. So yeah, and it still remains such a fascinating problem. Like, Hayden, you're hiring developers now. Like, how do you know if they're any good? Like, it's really challenging.
I mean, it's a real challenge.
Right. It's a real challenge.
That tons of people have.
But I almost wonder, like, okay, this is maybe a little bit more complicated. I think I would, as a person who wanted to submit my idea, would probably need to pay some money for it, right? But you take the idea and you really split it up to like a bunch of different sprints, right? Into smaller tasks that can be completed in less than 3 hours or whatever. And you're kind of just racing through it, and multiple people are writing the code, right? And then you can choose for whatever sprint you want, like whatever the best code is that integrates with the next best code kind of thing. Anyway, I think it's probably overly complicated, but I just think there's utility that's not being used. That's it. There's a possibility for a good use of that time.
Well, and it does highlight a broader theme, which is there's been all of these like evaluate developers, like programmer, hacker rank, all this kind of different stuff that's come along over the past 5 to 7 years. And clearly none of it has broken through to be useful enough for you two guys to use it to hire developers. Like there's still something more in this space. I do like that if you're going to be giving people programming things, you make them feel like they're not wasting their time. I always just, when I hired developers, I always just paid them money to do the interview, exam. Like, okay, we're going to pay you for 2 hours of work. What's your hourly rate for that? And at least that way they didn't feel like they were getting abused. But as rare as developer talent is these days, like, I don't know that you can actually still do that. This was like 3 years ago when the job market was really different. So I don't know. Hayden, you're helping people hire developers. Like, are people willing to do programming exams?
I've had success only when paying people to do the programming exams.
Yeah.
So maybe that there's a cross between getting people to do something that's actually part of a work product that you're going to use. Like you said, use the best code for that specific sprint and pay all of them to do it, but that can get expensive pretty quickly.
Right.
But it does help you find the right person. Like, right. Like is the ROI on that actually might be useful. If you find someone who's shows that they're willing to do the work, can do the work specific for your business and product, then do it quickly. Then maybe spend like spreading the wealth across 5-6 tests is it's totally worth the money.
Yeah, we'll see. Anyway, there's something there. There's utility there that needs to be captured. That's it.
Still room for startups in that space. I'm totally convinced of it. So that's a good one. All right, take us home with your Shopify app idea.
All right, so I recharge is like, I hate recharge. We're moving to a new so Shopify does not have a reoccurring subscription thing built into it, right? So my problem,
that's what recharge tries to do.
Recharge is an add-on that's like $500 or more a month. They take a percentage of your sales just to handle reoccurring subscriptions. I can go on about why Shopify doesn't build that first party, but we'll just say that they're an app store and they like the app revenue. My idea here was that I'm switching from Recharge to a different app called Smarter. I recently switched my fulfillment because we're changing our third-party logistics. And every time I make one of these changes, like I always like, wait, is checkout working? Like I always have that in the back of my mind. Like, is it working for all customers? Is it not working for some? And in the case of when I switched my fulfillment, it wasn't working for some. And I didn't know that for like a week. So that caused a ton of issues. And if I had a simple app, which would just go through the checkout at a specific cadence and, try different mixes of products, try different shipping speeds, different addresses, and it would just go through the checkout process and kind of record that process and also start throwing flags. So it's like cannot complete checkout, right? And if you get a cannot complete checkout flag, it would send you the video of how that bot checked out, right? And then so you can immediately just like go through it and be like, oh crap, that's what's wrong, and fix it, right? So it's just really seamless. It's really quick. It's something that you pay for and you hope you don't need to use it, but it's there for when you're missing out on, a tremendous amount of sales. It kind of pays for itself. That's the idea.
It's unit tests for e-commerce.
Yeah.
For your e-commerce checkout. It's super smart.
Yeah, I would say it's more than that. It's like there's the systems you can pay for that like monitor your site to make sure they're not down, that, if your servers go down, like PagerDuty is one of those, like for the enterprises. It's PagerDuty for the enterprise, or PagerDuty for e-com. And I like this a lot. So
I don't think it'd be that
hard to argue with this because you're like, Shingi, this is a real problem I have and something I'm willing to pay for. And it's like, oh, okay.
Right.
I'm not going to argue with that.
Is this something that if it gets developed, it becomes table stakes for every Shopify store owner?
Yeah.
That's doing over X amount of revenue?
I would say, downtime
right?
is money lost, right? So if you lose $100 in sales, right, when you could have had an app for $50 a month, kind of pays for itself.
And the alternative here right now is waiting. Either you randomly decide to check it, or a customer sends you an email and says, "I can't check out."
Exactly. And I hate doing the manual checks myself. I mean, I don't hate it, but it's kind of it. Like I try doing it myself. I'm already logged in. I already have an account. Like it's hard to start fresh every single time and make sure everything's working, right? Or like come up with a list of random addresses and random zip codes, all that stuff.
PagerDuty for Shopify or
go.
e-com.
Yeah.
I think this is great. This is a great place to end the episode on because this is a freaking great idea. Maybe we should chop this one out.
Best idea.
Somebody should make a lot of money on this one. This is awesome. This is awesome. All right. Super cool. Well, unless you guys got anything else, I would say let's go ahead and end this one here before we hit the 30-minute mark. And I think this was a good one. So
Oh,
nice
look,
job.
wait.
Nice job bringing some.
Michael, we got to do a fun one. Last one. Okay.
Go ahead.
And it's just the concept here. Have you guys all watched Squid Game? Have you guys seen that?
Yes.
Okay, everyone's watched Squid Game.
No.
The whole world. Okay. And then
I haven't seen.
have you seen the show Love is
You
Blind?
haven't seen it?
No.
Is that the one where they don't see the person and then they start dating?
Well, they get engaged. So basically, you don't see the person until you get engaged, right? So Netflix should combine Squid Game with Love is Blind, right? So basically, if you can kind of imagine how that would work, it would really gamify. And you basically kill the person if you don't get engaged to them. Is kind of the premise of that. And they're already in little pods. It just opens and they just drop down. Something like that. It would be a very interesting show for Netflix. Just gonna let them have that one.
Why go to Netflix? You just go straight to Mr. Beast for this. That's what I think you do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, on that note, we will end the episode. Excellent job, everybody. We'll see you next time when we have more business ideas and money making schemes. So thanks for being here.